It is now a full year since Nintendo revealed Thousand Year Door. Screamed my ass off a whole year ago over the remake's announcement. And I still haven't beaten the game. But between that, traveling, a once busted PC, after traveling, working IRL, Smash Ultimate competitive grinding, and other stuff, I got a laundry list of topics and news over a month old between now and early August to cover. So you'll see several videos from me talking about stuff that came and went weeks ago, because I never got the chance to do so. So, you know a Paper Mario discussion can always take some precedence. And ever since we got that initial reveal for the remake, one burning question was in a lot of Paper Mario fans' minds. How much was this remake gonna sell? The constantly acclaimed best Paper Mario from fans on the internet was finally getting a remake. It was given a second chance just to get dolled up, be given to a new, wider audience with the Switch. It's a lot of great small touch-ups and quality of life updates and other things that this remake got. Asset overhauls, they did tweak it a lot. Even amidst the handful of gripes I and some may have with it, it is a wonderful remake at its core. And as far as how much it has sold, at the beginning of August, Nintendo dropped this financial report. They do this quarterly fiscal reports and financial updates. They do this across the year, they calculate across 3-month intervals and reporting on each one sometime after they each end March, June, September, and December, and each fiscal year starts after March in April. Reports eventually come several weeks after. They debriefed on various financial reports, and for a couple games beyond Thousand Year Door, their unit sales overall, just a considerable decline compared to last year. The Switch family of systems as a whole, compared to last quarter, went down 46.3%, and software down 41.3%, as you're seeing on this little PowerPoint slide from the reports. But this slide, and another one regarding Nintendo Switch first-party software sell-through, I'm just going to read off what they gathered. During the first quarter of the previous fiscal year, unit sales of both hardware and software were extremely high for a first quarter, when the Super Mario Bros. Movie energized our dedicated video game platform business, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom released, together with specially designed hardware based on that title. There were no such special factors in the first quarter of this fiscal year, and with Nintendo Switch now in its 8th year since launch, unit sales of both hardware and software decreased significantly year on year. Unit sales of the hardware in the first quarter of this year held at the same level as the previous quarter, showing that sales are stable. Looking at software, our newly released titles got off to a good start. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, released in May, has sold 1.76 million units, and Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, released in June, has sold 1.19 million units. Second slide, although overall sell-through is below the level of the past few years, sales have been stable for Princess Peach Showtime and the new Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Sell-through for first-party software for Nintendo Switch in the first quarter was lower than the levels of the past few years, including the same period fiscal last year, when Zelda Tears of the Kingdom recorded strong sales. However, sales of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, released on May 23rd, were solid, selling more than 1.3 million units in the 6 weeks after release. In addition, Princess Peach Showtime, which was released on March 22nd during the previous fiscal year, has posted cumulative sell-through of over 1.3 million units. Sell-through during this fiscal year has accounted for approximately half of that total. This title can also be enjoyed by people who don't usually play action games. We expect sales to continue to grow in the long term. Plus, there's this graph that shows the sales across every Paper Mario game, the whole franchise, between first quarter sales of each game and lifetime sales. So it's a surprising amount of information to unpack, even long after everyone else perused through this information. I appreciate your pennies for my thoughts. Now, this information, like every fiscal report, account for the last month of each period. This is information that got recorded up to the end of June. And in that short amount of time, despite how much criticism it got, and how bare bones of a remaster it is, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is practically selling as well in the same time span as Dark Moon did on 3DS, which, Jesus Christ, Luigi's Mansion is that tentpole Mario series at this point, so no matter what form it'll take now, I suppose, it's just gonna do really well. And it's interesting Nintendo has faith in Peach Showtime, accumulating even more sales over the course of the Switch's life, because on paper it makes sense with how popular of a character Peach is, and how the barrier of entry for any type of person is low, and the presentation and charm is high with Peach Showtime. But I also don't think those are new numbers for Peach Showtime either. I could be wrong. So if it's not new numbers and Nintendo still has faith in it, I am really curious about it and its future performance, but I wanted to give my 2 cents on those 2 games before Thousand Year Door. So, Thousand Year Door, as of late June 2024, sold 1.76 million copies so far. And to start things off, I know this isn't everyone, but I did see a decent number of people online marking the remake as a flop with these numbers, and it was wasted effort and so, but also some worry that this isn't even close to how much Origami King and Super Paper Mario sold, with their 3 and 4+ million units respectively, equating to the RPG-style formula bolstered by denser plots with layered characters, backgrounds, and personalities to not be viable after all. And bare minimum for me, I'm confident most felt this too. I feel Origami King and the remake for Super Mario RPG, those 3 slightly above 3 million unit sales figures, should be the standard for how notable and great 1,000 Year Door should sell. So let's start with that. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't very hopeful 1,000 Year Door was going to go to the moon with sales. Oh, this game, the remake might even sold, 5 million, 10 million sales. It's going to sell as good as a mainline Mario. Get your ass back down to earth. Snap back to reality. There ultimately wasn't that much going in 1,000 Year Doors' favor to be breaking records, especially when you ultimately look at other Switch titles that dropped this year so far. This, Luigi's Mansion 2, it performing as well, but not surpassing and breaking records from Dark Moon, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Peach Showtime, those 2 games just cracking 1 million units, etc. And I set my expectations too high there. I can easily admit that. Even with that though, I feel like deep down, I probably saw this coming, for reasons I'll get to in a couple minutes, and obviously, everyone playing it says it's good, reviews are good across the board, it's 1,000 Year Door. And especially with some of the quality of life updates and small improvements it made to the original, it definitely is a better experience on multiple fronts than the original. So it would hypothetically warm up to more people. Like, it is a good game. I don't think anybody's really going to argue against that. But I really do think 1.76 million copies being a flop is a little overdramatic, because this is a whole topic on its own. You could probably make a whole video on this. I shit you not though. You hear this with a couple of other Nintendo franchises in the sphere of Paper Mario itself. Just going off the graph of series sales, this is 100% within Paper Mario's realm of sales. It's basically on track to outperform the original version, assuming it hasn't by now. That, at the barest of minimums with how close it is, I think is something we can all agree is way more realistic to expect. That, first quarter sales for the remake surpassed 64's lifetime sales, Super's quarter sales almost matched Sticker Stars. Like, it's around the average expectance for what the series' sales have done up until this point. And it's done all of this in 38 days and near the end of a console's life. That's really good no matter how you spin it. And even Nintendo's trying to account for outside factors like how Wonder, RPG, and whatnot had the Mario movie during that year. Nintendo said in the report they felt sales were solid and stable. They themselves seem relatively pleased with how 1,000 Year Door is doing, saying stuff like this. Any less would definitely be more disappointing and worrisome, especially if closer down to like 1-ish million. But this also ultimately reminded me that, damn, you really can't expect any other Mario series besides the 2D games, 3D, Kart, Party, and Luigi's Mansion games to hit those 10 million marks. But it is exactly that. Not every Mario game is selling or performing as well as those 5 series. It is still good sales at its core. And beyond that, I might rustle some feathers with what I'm about to say, but I feel like some people overbloat the hell out of how insanely good the flagship Nintendo franchises sell compared to every other franchise, and don't understand what developers or companies see in games, performances and factors towards their sales, and what they consider an actual failure or success. Because here's a good example of what I'm trying to say. You could call ARMS the worst game in the entire world of all time. You could dislike it for a myriad of reasons in the world. But all the time, I hear how that game flopped, when for almost any other franchise, you never hear 2.72 million units, almost 3 million units, is a flop anywhere else. If it's not selling like Smash, Zelda, Pokemon, Animal Crossing numbers, it's a flop. But they don't want to hear, or they don't care about the fact that that's more than most Kirby game sales, Fire Emblem, Metroid, Xenoblade, etc. Because it's not that ARMS flopped, it's that those people don't like or care for ARMS. You never hear this with like Kirby sales or Metroid sales. You only hear this how those and other series are selling compared to previous entries. How if these games are selling within parameters of expectancy or underperforming or surpassing those parameters, and why they're doing so. ARMS sold really good, especially for a brand new first party IP from Nintendo before it got flooded by the staple platinum first parties like Splatoon 2. Sonic Mania is not a first party, but like that, Mario plus Rabbids, Mario Kart 8, Odyssey, blah blah blah. And I really do feel like it's a lot of people's own bias for the game itself, because at that point Fire Emblem consistently has been a flop. Metroid always flops. Mario RPGs, Mario Sports, Kirby, WarioWare, Xenoblade, Yoshi, every Nintendo series that aren't the ones everyone only plays one or two of. It sounds ridiculous, and it isn't true when you really boil it down. I understand comparing the series itself within its own records, especially for those multi-million ones, but I feel like any game cracking 1 million is something every developer wants to achieve. That's not an easy feat. People really aren't paying attention to what these companies deem a success or failure, or the factors related to those, and it feels like it's a lot of bias and projection in some cases. That's a whole other topic for another time. In Thousand Year Door's case though, I think a lot of discussion surrounding it doing well or failing for most people online, it's from specific people either trying to underestimate how good Thousand Year Door is and how much people like it, but it's also primarily from people nervous because this objectively doesn't surpass Origami King sales in particular, or Super Mario RPG sales figures as well. These numbers give off the impression to some that it's not enough to persuade Nintendo and Intelligent Systems that Thousand Year Door's format with its RPG gameplay and its type of writing, concepts for scenarios and characters and story and such, is worth revisiting for a brand new type of Paper Mario game. And I fully understand the fear. We've been through this tirade for more than a decade. 3 strikes in that amount of time, then finally a home run, long after those, still waiting on a grand slam, if not a double home run, on a new entry that isn't just a remake. 1 or 2 million sales, I feel like people underestimate too much as disappointing or mediocre sales. Yeah, it's not great, but it's not bad by any means too. It's still good, and there are multiple reasons for any product selling whatever number. As much as I'd love to dream it will, Paper Mario was never going to hit those several million feats for several reasons. Anyone out there definitely has at least that one game where they hope or just wish it'd sell super well and millions would love it even more and it'd be this bigger success than anyone would ever expect. I feel like that on its own is just a normal feeling to have. I wish Thousand Year Door sold even more than it is right now. I feel this for many other games as well. But I was at least hoping it'd track along the same spectrum as Origami King and RPG sales, because those two games sold ridiculously similarly, and those are numbers that do stand out when it comes to Mario RPGs as a whole. So the fact Thousand Year Door's sales do not match, and may potentially never match those sales, was the main thing that worried some people, including me. And it genuinely did look like it was going to have that same type of momentum. It really did, and I felt it had good reason to do so. But also, you gotta bear in mind, it is still early. We still don't know how it sold throughout July and August, where summer kicked off for everyone. We still have the fall, the winter, the holiday. We're not in front of the Switch's 2 door just yet, like 2 inches from the actual glass. I'm not writing it off completely because we still need to know for sure if it does have that momentum by the end of the next quarter. It very well could. I'm not getting my hopes up, but it's certainly a possibility. Time will tell, but as far as we know, it very well might not, and I think I understand why. Despite how it almost hit that 2 million mark in 6 weeks, and that in its own is really good, even with the massive install base for the Switch as it is now, the bulk of why Thousand Year Door is selling as it is now, I believe, boils down to the fact that we're at the end of the Switch's life. Paper Mario was never like mainline Mario, Mario Kart Smash, Zelda, Splatoon, to be able to come swinging out of the gates with double-digit monster super selling numbers, but also to have that power to just maintain those numbers throughout their lifetime on that system, to just keep selling for years at a steady and thick enough rate. Paper Mario is popular in its own way, but it's not built for that like the other Mario series as it was for the last 20 plus years, and Nintendo knows that. Super Paper Mario was the only one to really get its feet off the ground, but it also had the benefit of being on a popular, very successful Nintendo console at the very beginning of its life. Super was the very first Mario game on the Wii, so even with its glaring issues, it managed to have legs within the realm of Paper Mario the entire system's lifespan because of those factors, albeit only up to 4.25 million, but still. Conversely, it make sense to why Origami King sold as best as it probably ever could have, because, despite its own issues too, it, like plenty of games during the pandemic, including particularly Animal Crossing New Horizons, its only other competition at the time really, dropped only months into the pandemic. At its height, 2020 didn't have that many games coming out at a time where everyone was stuck at home. All of this always accounting for the Switch's huge install base and active players. That goes without saying too, and at first glance, it gives a much more standard, friendlier vibe to casual gamers and whatnot, and it likely gave most of the Switch crowd that Paper Mario fix. Maybe some masses felt it was bloated to have 2 Paper Marios, given plenty had their fill with Origami King, even though they're both extremely different games. But even with that, Origami King didn't have much legs either. It only pushed 650,000 copies after that first quarter, and it kinda just stopped after a while. Almost exactly the same lifetime performance as Sticker Star. Color Splash not even cracking 1 million, but that can easily be chalked up to the fact it dropped at the tail end of a system's life that sold ridiculously poorly. Paper Mario's just never been that series outside of Super to have momentum. And even if Thousand Year Door does get that momentum, it basically has just 1 whole year left ahead to really get itself going, which even then, by the time Nintendo announces and shows off Switch 2, that interest in a lot of Switch titles from this and previous years, I feel like it's going to fizzle out almost immediately and completely migrate to the next system. Even with the next system almost guaranteed having backwards compatibility with Switch games, it's almost guaranteed to significantly impact interest in sales for every title for that current hardware and die off once that new hardware comes out. And this goes for a good chunk of titles that dropped last year in 2023 as well. A lot of Switch titles this last year have kind of just been selling okay, not breaking all that many records, coasting with good numbers, nothing crazy though. Even with Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Like, I could picture that game selling a couple more million copies, maybe even matching Dark Moon's 6+ million if it's lucky, but even then, that's not that crazy because Luigi's Mansion 3 sold 2.5 times more, right? Mario RPG, that also kind of went through the same thing Origami King and Sticker Star did. Games sold over 3 million copies, and effectively the same amount of time Thousand Year Door sold its 1.76 million, and RPG just straight up stopped after that. Only like a couple 100,000 extra since that first quarter, almost a whole year later. And I know there have been plenty of other games beyond all the Mario stuff this and last year. We're about to get a new 2D Zelda. We're getting a new Mario and Luigi, a new Mario Party this holiday. Mario Party's one of those evergreen big system sellers, and Jamboree looks to be the best Mario Party in over a decade. We still have Metroid Prime 4 and a new Pokemon next year, plus Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. So there is that little slimmer of chance there will be just a little more life in the Switch in the near future for Thousand Year Door to absorb, but I'm not expecting it to be that much. We've also been talking about another remake in a sea of plenty of remakes and remasters for this thing. Remakes rarely outsell their original versions. It's not a brand new game. But I say that, and Mario RPG's remake outsold the original, Origami King, and Thousand Year Door, etc. So it does bring into question how much this remake versus brand new game factor played into Thousand Year Door's sales. It might not have been the grand scheme for all we know. There's also the possibility that we might be going through this Mario RPG oversaturation at the moment. Mario RPG, released in November last year. Thousand Year Door only dropped 6 months after that, and now we're getting a new Mario and Luigi 6 months after that. Just back-to-back-to-back Mario RPGs within a single year. Just 1 year of non-stop Mario RPGs, which I love immensely, but these might blend into each other for some people, and maybe just RPG or Mario and Luigi is enough for fans to get their fill that they don't need Thousand Year Door. But that could also mean the opposite, because people have asked for Mario RPG specific Mario games for so long that maybe Thousand Year Door will maintain some momentum, especially by this holiday with Mario and Luigi. Maybe it doesn't really matter how similar these three games are, coming out so close to one another as far as consumer interest. That last factor, I believe, is probably not really a thing against these games. I mean, how many people are really going to claim there's too many Mario RPGs specifically going around like it's a bad thing, when that's what Mario fans have been asking for during the lowest Mario RPGs have been dealing with the last several years until RPG Remake, especially when they all do a lot of things differently from one another. Because, like, if that was true, New Super Mario Bros. 2 and U wouldn't have sold so well anyways, dropping back to back. Not as good as New Super Wii or DS, still really good, especially U Deluxe. But I do believe all of these, to very minor, decently major degrees, is why Thousand Year Door is performing as it is right now. But the Switch's life, Switch 2 on the horizon of being announced, general interest overall in the Switch dwindling a good amount, even when over 140 plus people have the system, I think that's the big one. The main reason to why Thousand Year Door isn't hitting the same stride Mario RPG did last year and Origami King did 4 years ago. Whether the game ran at 30 FPS or 60, your average casual and hardcore gamer, especially when it comes to a Mario game made by Nintendo, I sincerely doubt is a genuine factor at all in anyone buying these, outside literally just like 1 or 2 people. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think that has made a genuine difference all on its own in anyone's decision to buy the game or not, for those wondering. I'm just gonna quash that fast right now. Let's be realistic. But all this logistic rambling and reasonings factored or not, we do ultimately just don't know. We can only make educated guesses at the end of it. But call me hopeful with what I'm about to say, but as far as the future of Paper Mario, a new entry adopting creative characters, richer stories, and an easy to understand yet complex battle system, Mario RPGs as a whole in the future maintaining this path of just being Mario RPGs and good games under those genres, and Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi just continuing those roots, maybe even RPG, the SNES remake game getting a new entry as well, or just Thousand Year Door sales being good, great, or whatever. As good as it is selling right now, I don't think there is that much to worry about, even specifically regarding Paper Mario itself. For one thing, again, Nintendo themselves have said Thousand Year Door sales are solid and stable, so it's clear that Thousand Year Door met some goal Nintendo had, and they're satisfied with the game's performance. I firmly believe Nintendo is very aware of the circumstances surrounding this game's release versus Origami Kings, a new game released in the middle of the pandemic with not a lot of other games to compete against it in the middle of the Switch's life, versus a remake being released in the middle of late spring/early summer amidst a lot of other smaller titles, spin-offs, remasters, remakes, and other titles far past the pandemic, near the end of the system's life in its 8th year. It's still very early to really say how well the game will do from here on out until both the fall quarter and the holiday. Yeah, the odds of this 1.76 million unit record being over 90% of the sales this remake will ever get is considerable, but crazier things have happened if it does break out with double the sales, if not more, or even less than that. Worst case, it's most likely going to pass the 2 million mark by the time Switch 2 drops, and that's still pretty good, given that's around Sticker Star sales, which that probably is the great sales baseline for Paper Mario, fundamentally speaking. And I'll be okay with it hitting that mark, realistically speaking. And the bulk of why I'm not really worried anymore is the fact we have so many Mario RPGs dropping so close to one another, and the sheer fact these specific remakes and this new Mario & Luigi exist at all. Nintendo often is very deliberate when it comes to their scheduling for games and hardware, ever since the Switch was even built. That's why Origami King dropped in the middle of 2020 and did really good for a Paper Mario. Mario RPG's good sales, I'm confident, are attributed to its holiday window of release and in the same year as the Mario movie, which Nintendo credits giving a considerable form of secondhand interest and marketing to its games. I have no doubt Mario Wonder got most of that boost. Mario RPG, though, I have no doubt got at least a little of it as well. The holiday release window is definitely the main big reason, and Mario & Luigi is being released near the holiday season this year, just like RPG. I couldn't tell you for sure how much Mario & Luigi is going to sell for sure, only guess, but given Mario & Luigi's consistently been more popular than Paper Mario, and it's coming around the holiday, I'd bet way more safely that that game at worst can crack past 2 million in the first 2 months. But I genuinely believe that game at least might crack 3 million units on its own. And Thousand Year Door hasn't gotten a holiday experience yet. Mario Party's definitely gonna get more mileage out of the holiday, and I'm sure Mario & Luigi will too, being a new game releasing closer to the holiday, but that's also another thing. Nintendo's also releasing Super Mario Party Jamboree in October. They're adding and tweaking the best of Super Mario Party for that game, but it's safe to see the bulk of the best of Superstars is being used as a basis for Jamboree way more, and Superstars' 12 million unit sales is way less than Super Mario Party's monstrous 20 million, but they're taking that feedback to heart and constructing the best Mario Party in ages from the more well-received one, despite selling worse. Part of it always was just Paper Mario should be more RPG-like and less experimental. I personally prefer it way more to adopt an RPG gameplay foundation it can expand on and give so many different options for combat and strategy, while also not restricting its characters and worlds it takes place in. But it largely did become just Mario RPGs, this constantly sought-after genre of Mario games that millions love across all three types, getting shafted for seemingly no reason, and Nintendo not just not prioritizing them anymore, but not seeing them as viable, worthwhile IPs to maintain as sub-Mario series. If there wasn't a demand for Mario RPGs, the remake for RPG wouldn't exist at all. It would not have sold as well as it did, even when it got the holiday slot. Thousand Year Door would have never got remade if that was true too. They've made a conscious effort of not touching Thousand Year Door ever again after Super, and now we finally have this remake alongside RPG. Mario & Luigi getting a new game, you could chalk up to just the fact Mario & Luigi hasn't gotten a new game in a while, as it always had a new game periodically for 2 decades almost. Because Mario & Luigi was always a Mario RPG series and always was good, it's just Paper Jam is the most uninspired one, and only uninspired one, by a wide margin. But Nintendo still decided to release it shortly after Thousand Year Door, and Thousand Year Door shortly after RPG. And that's not factoring Bug Fables, Born of Bread, Scrap Story, Java Saga, all the indie games, with most of them styled after Paper Mario, but also Mario & Luigi. Whether or not you factor the indie games, Nintendo is very aware of the demand of these types of Mario games and are methodically dropping all these Mario RPG titles so close to each other. I really think this and their comments on Thousand Year Doors' sales do paint a clearer picture that yes, there is an audience and a clear, palpable, worthwhile demand for RPG Mario games, and that's not even all there is to confirm that. I'm not expecting this But based on some code left over in Thousand Year Door that the game can handle 4K resolutions, and some have found similar code like this in multiple Switch games that released these last few years, I do think there is a chance if Nintendo wants more sales out of Thousand Year Door, they might make an upgraded version for Switch 2 with the buffed frame rate, loading, text dialogue skipper, and smaller stuff or whatever. I'm not expecting it, because they had an excuse to make a lot of Switch versions for Wii U ports. They're not really forced to do so for Switch games to Switch 2, especially if it's backwards compatible, plus when has Paper Mario ever really got re-released on a different console that wasn't legacy content. But once again, crazier things have happened before. Point is though, with Paper Mario itself and the grand scope of Mario RPGs, I think we're at a point where we don't have to solely rely on the sales figures to determine Paper Mario's future and the future of Mario RPGs. RPGs sold well, but in Thousand Year Door were received extremely well. There's plenty of anticipation for Mario & Luigi Brothers ship, and the holiday slot will benefit its odds of selling very well too. Nintendo wanted to drop all of these within the same year of each other. The creativity, character design diversity, and restrictionless types of charm in Mario games are spread across so many different types of Mario games on Switch, with Odyssey, Wonder, Peach Showtime, the Mario plus Rabbids games, Luigi's Mansion 3, the sports games to a smaller extent, Mario & Luigi Brothers ship, and of course, RPG and Thousand Year Door. If it did come down to sales figures, I think it depends on how well Thousand Year Door would perform up to the end of this year, and Mario & Luigi Brothers ship sales as well. But RPG gives the genre a leg to stand on, and Nintendo themselves are relatively pleased with Thousand Year Doors' performance so far. So there's not a whole lot to really stress over, especially without any solid conclusions as of yet. And when it sounds like even Nintendo agrees and is aware of more factors beyond just the numbers. I wish it outsold Origami King, but I'm starting to believe it doesn't have to for it and the others. A lot of hypotheticals and conjecture thrown around, but I'm sure the future of Mario RPGs and Paper Mario is still on an upward slope, and there is still the chance Thousand Year Door can keep going and not stop at just under or barely above 2 million. We'll have to wait and see. Thank you very much for watching, and stay super.
哟，嘿，妹妹，嘿，我来呀！共和大哈哈呀！拉面，嘿，来面，来个面，共和再见呀！哈哈，拉面，呛手面，谢谢。